Welcome back to Creating Your Life. This is Episode 8, Subconscious Repository, Part 2. Hi, this is Marc-Andre Alexander back for more on the Subconscious Repository. As you'll recall from last time, we were talking about how the conscious mind perceives and connects things to experience, then evaluates it and responds to it. This is what we consciously do. And as we consciously repeat things over and over again, the subconscious repository begins the process of storing it and making it automatic. So anything you repeat gets stored, whether it's learning how to type, learning how to play a musical instrument, learning how to drive a car. Those patterns get stored, and then pretty soon you're doing them automatically. So you're driving down the road and you can forget you're driving. You can be off in your head, daydreaming, and then suddenly come back realizing, oh, how was it that I didn't even drive off the road? That's the value of the subconscious repository. It also stores anything that's a habit or a preference. So anything you repeat habitually gets stored. It becomes a pattern. It's why people you know in your life, if it's Wednesday, we do this. If it's Saturday, we do that. We tend to follow traditions. We tend to follow patterns. We get used to doing things because they got stored, because they were repeated. It also stores your self-image, so that a picture you have of yourself, something that you believe about yourself, something you tell yourself over and over again, or something you hear from other people repeatedly, that picture of yourself gets stored and becomes automatic as well. So this plays out in ways that are unexpected sometimes. It's like when a teacher early on, you're learning how to do mathematics, let's say, and when you're in third or fourth grade or some early schooling, a teacher gives you a standardized test and says, oh, the standardized test says that you're weak in math. And you may have taken that in. Oh, thanks for letting me know. I might have tried. Okay, I'm weak in math. That's how I am. And guess what? You become weak in math, and that's what you expect. But there's one other thing that the subconscious repository does, and this gets into even more interesting territory. It stores reality. It stores the world out there and the way you perceive it habitually. In other words, if you're told that the world works a certain way over and over again, as a young child, for example, that picture of the world can get stored and your subconscious will automatically begin helping you see the world that way. In other words, it stores reality. It stores what you perceive the truth to be, whatever that may be. So it could be in the lines of religion, like some famous Jesuit Catholic priest once said, give me a child before they're 7 and I will have them the rest of their life. If I can get them early enough, I can get these pictures in their head and they will have certain beliefs and see the world in certain ways. If you are raised in a certain country, there are certain cultural norms in a country that become a part of you, and it's the way you expect the world to behave. But when you start traveling, you see other cultures have different stored patterns, different ways they see reality as working. And so you can begin to start learning how to adapt to other cultures if you begin to see other ways of doing. Now, initially, the mistake that can be made is you begin to travel and you think, oh, my culture is the one and only reality, and I want to now try to get everybody else to follow my culture. It's not to say that all cultures are equal. There are some cultures that would be more destructive, others more constructive. Sometimes that's a matter of opinion. I would argue in some cases there's an objective way to evaluate that, but that's for a later podcast, video cast. So it stores reality, whether it's religious, political, cultural, whatever. You may have been told over and over again or been raised with people who believe, oh, the French are this way, or the Germans are that way, or the Japanese are this way versus the Chinese who we know are that way. So you can get a picture of people that is stored as a picture that can actually begin to influence how you perceive reality. Now, Certain kinds of stereotypes arise because they're true, but just because something is a stereotype doesn't mean that it applies to everybody you meet. The danger is that a picture gets stored of reality, the world, or other people, where you start seeing the picture in your head more than you see what's actually in front of you. And in some cases, the picture in your head will overrule what you see in front of you. Stereotypes then, even though they may arise from some kind of cultural pattern or some kind of pattern that's repeated, stereotypes do not necessarily apply to the individuals that you meet. And so learning how to tell the difference, that there may be a cultural stereotype, but when you actually meet certain people, you got to be aware that the picture in your mind does not get in the way of who they are. So the subconscious repository takes things off the table for you so that you don't have to deal with them consciously, that you can respond automatically to the patterns that get stored. Patterns about your preferences and habits, anything you get repeated, about your self-image, the kind of person you are in the world, about reality, other people, politics, religion, any number of things. And so it's a good time, before we move on, to start asking yourself some questions. Are there rocks in your head? Are there things that have been stored in your subconscious that are not really serving you and become images, pictures, stored information that's getting in your way? So what's preventing you from seeing something else or behaving differently? The way a certain company is, the people at work. People, relationships, family, philosophies, and religions, your abilities, your achievements, your past and future, your attitudes, your habits, your self-image. All of these things can be stored in your head in such a way that they are limiting. They limit your ability to see what you can achieve. They limit your ability to understand other people, other cultures, other political or religious ideas. Anything that starts constricting you can be a rock in your head. And one of the things we find out is that things get more easily stored once you believe they are absolutely true. If you have absolute certainty about how the French are or how the Germans are, if you see somebody behaving in a way that doesn't match your picture, you'll make an excuse for it. You'll say, oh yeah, well, that's an exception, but it doesn't. It's an exception that proves the rule. You'll find some way to rationalize away and keep your absolute picture. Holding absolute views is one way of creating rocks that get stored. If you know it's going to be true, it gets stored that way, and now your mind begins to work to start screening out information that does not conform to your picture. And this is the danger of having rocks in your head. It literally can start creating blind spots to that truth. So observe yourself. What do you know that's absolutely true? And what kind of absolute statements do you hear in you and around you? Everyone knows that. He's always like this. They never do it that way. There's no use in doing that. Does locking on to an absolute truth blind you in some way? Back in 2008, there was a study that showed that attitude certainty increases resistance to persuasion. The more certain you are, the less likely you're going to be persuaded to an alternative point of view. That's all for now. In the next episode, we're going to go into the adaptive unconscious, and this is a real magician, a real spin doctor that works inside of your head.